Well, good evening and welcome to About the Valley. And my guest tonight is Ben Roesch. Ben is a new business owner in town, fairly new. We've been how many months now?
I think we're just about the second month, so we've been open
Yeah.
for 7 or 8 weeks.
And that is at Murder Hill Brewing, which formerly Purgatory Brewery.
Yep, anyone that's familiar with the space, it'll feel very familiar.
Yep. And he got the name because he lives on Murder Hill in Sutton.
It's not in Sutton, actually. We live in Holden, and I just call the woods next to the house Murder Hill for all the families of crows that live up in the
Oh, okay.
trees. Yeah,
So you live in Holden.
yeah, that's true.
You
Yep.
get a little bit of a commute.
Yeah, it's about half an hour, so it's enough that when something springs to mind, I don't just jump out of bed and drive down here.
Right.
And I got enough time to sort out my thoughts on the way home. So long enough, but obviously a short commute's nice. So
Right. Now, you're not new to the brewing business. You actually had a brewery in Worcester.
yeah, I've been a professional brewer for almost 24 years.
Oh wow, you have plenty of experience.
Yeah, most recently as a co-founder of Wormtown Brewery in Worcester. So.
How did you get into it?
So way back in now for me 25, 26 years ago, I started home brewing in college. So
Oh, that's what a
during
lot of brewers did. Started as home
yeah
brewers, right?
yeah I mean when you're young and you're going to college and you're learning about things is also the time when you're legally able to start drinking beer and
Yeah.
you start asking questions
And you don't have a
about.
lot of money.
No, you don't have a lot of money, so home brewing definitely is a cheaper way to get beer. And
Yeah.
at least 25 years ago, some of the styles of beer that are prevalent now due to the proliferation of microbreweries weren't available back then. So
No, it was the standard national beers that you see on the market.
right, and the revolution of craft brewing had definitely come about. I went to UMass in Amherst, and Amherst Brewing Company was open. Berkshire Brewing Company was open. So, you really had to think about what made those beers unique the way they were versus, what I would call commodity beer, mass-produced beer that, you just pick up and it all kind of tastes the same. And
You
a-
heard about that.
as a young man and going to college and learning about stuff, it was, well, how do I figure this out? And you read a book. And that's what
Yeah.
I did. And really the only books about beer that were available back then were home brewing books. Or large technical manuals that brewers would use. So I read a book about home brewing, got all my answers. Also picked up the knowledge on how to make some beer at home in a 5-gallon bucket and started doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Over here in Amherst.
yep, yep. And my room didn't have a closet, so my roommate volunteered to let me ferment in his closet. So we're still friends. They get beer, as a payback still. So.
Yeah, because actually you weren't supposed to be doing it, right?
No. It was legal for us to do it.
Oh, did the school allowed it?
We were off campus at that point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't in the dorm rooms. No. I mean, for anyone watching, fermentation isn't that hard. Yeast eats sugar, creates alcohol.
Right.
I wish I had known in high school how I could do it. I would have been buying malt extract and fermenting in the woods or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it got you into making your own beer, and from
Yeah.
there, how did you get into business?
Well, brewing I think of as like cooking, right? And it's a long way to go from making a meal in your house for your friends and family to being a restaurateur or even being a professional chef.
Right.
And it's the same being a brewer. You learn as you go along. So you learn what the ingredients are. You learn about cleaning and sanitation. And then for me, I was passionate enough about it that I got out of school and was working in forestry, which is what I got my degree in. But
Oh,
on the
you go to
weekends,
the Stockbridge School?
so I took a lot of Stockbridge classes, but I graduated from Food and Natural Resources College at UMass with a 4-year degree. And, the idea of being able to be a brewer you don't think of when you're 16 years old, especially at the time in the late 90s. There were still only hundreds of breweries in the U.S.
Right.
Where as we stand right now, there's 10,000 breweries in the U.S.
I know it's getting to be a brewery in every town.
Yeah, yeah. You should probably be able to walk or drive within about 10 or 15 minutes on average in the U.S.
Right.
to a brewery. And obviously in the Northeast we're population dense, so that holds pretty true. And it probably not as much in the Midwest. But the idea of a career in beer wasn't something that was on my mind. I was just passionate about brewing beer and exploring the ingredients and the techniques. And I got a job working part time at a homebrew shop while I was doing forestry. It was West Boylston Homebrew Emporium over on Route 12,
Yeah.
over by the reservoirs there. And a guy I was working with, in fact, he was texting me earlier. We're still friends, and we were talking probably over a beer one day about, geez, you never really think about this when you're younger. In the United States with a 21-year-old, drinking age and the culture being what it is, you don't think, oh, I could grow up and I could make wine for a living, or I could distill spirits. They're
Right.
usually just in the store and you don't really get the connection, especially the agricultural connection, I think is lost on people. But, I said, boy, if only I'd known I could have been a brewer, 4 or 5 years ago. Now I got a degree in student loans for forestry. Boy, I wish I could have been a brewer. And he said, what's stopping you? He goes, you should apply at a brewery. And I said, I don't know. I've been brewing at home. Is that even a thing? And he said, actually, his day job was working in a photography studio. And he was working in Kendall Square in Cambridge. He said, I go to Cambridge Brewing Company. It's been there for, 12 or 13 years at this point. And I saw they had a part-time opening for an assistant brewer. He said, you should apply. I said, really? I don't know. He goes, I'll figure out how you apply. And I did, and, I was lucky enough to get the job. And from there, I did that and about 4 other part-time jobs at the same time. I was still doing forestry. I was a substitute teacher. I was an assistant brewer.
Right, you gotta pay the student loans.
Oh yeah. The bills keep coming,
Yeah.
and so I got a second part-time job up at Wachusett Brewing Company in Westminster.
Yes.
And I was working both of those for a little while, and then Wachusett offered me a full-time position, and I worked there for a couple of years. And along the way, I was just asking questions, reading books, voraciously reading all the the magazines that would come out about professional brewing, any of the books, learning from people on the job. I mean, Will Myers at Cambridge Brewing, Dave Howard at Wachusett just taught me a ton of stuff about professional brewing.
Didn't Wachusett the one that really introduced the fruit in the beer, weren't they?
Blueberry Ale was a huge,
Yeah, they were the
huge
first ones to
beer.
do it, weren't they?
I don't know if they were the first, but I think they've become
that I know.
the most popular.
Yeah.
There might have been a couple up in Maine. Those Mainers hold their blueberries close, so
Yeah.
there's probably a couple of breweries up there.
But in this area, they really brought it about. Now it's become very popular, different flavors of,
oh yeah, fruit beer in general is very popular. In fact, that became, when I was a brewer there, the #1 beer.
yes.
So, that's one of the things you learn is there's, just like restaurants, there's production restaurants that do high volume, and you're probably going to be, the guy that's cutting up onions or carrots, all day, every day. And then
Right.
there's really small places where you take the ingredients from, wherever you get them from to the plate as an individual. And you learn, okay, well, maybe my place in this industry is one or the other.
Yeah,
And I have found over time, 20 plus years, that my favorite place to be is in one of the smaller places where I get to see it from the farmer all the way to the
right,
customer.
you take it right from the start right to the end.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that's changed, even in the ingredient supply in brewing. It isn't, it can be. You can just call up a malt company and get malted barley, malted wheat. You can get the hops in bags, and you can just make stuff. But that's what everyone can do. For me, one of the things that, I hang my hat on is getting local ingredients. And now there's local malt houses, and that was a missing link for a little while there.
Yeah.
Was they've been growing grains, or they call them small grains, barley and wheat, around for a while, but it was really the next step, the malting part. So all that barley or wheat would go for maybe, say, flour production or
Right.
feed for animals. But malting it makes it so brewers can use it. So when Valley Malt opened up in 2010, I was their first customer, and
Where are they located?
so they're in Holyoke now, and they
Okay.
are the first modern malt house east of the Mississippi.
Wow.
You know, along with a lot of our agricultural and a lot of our industrial processes, as the east, you know, got very dense, stuff moved out to where there's more land.
Yeah, well, people don't realize, unless you travel out past Palmer,
Hmm.
it's a lot of farms out there.
Hmm.
If you don't go out there, you'd never know it. Right, in the Amherst area,
Right.
you're surrounded by farms. I mean, large farms too. Around here, we have some small farms that might do what you call truck farming.
Yeah.
But out there, I mean, it's huge.
So when you drink a pint of beer, think about what went into it, and
Right.
it's barley that's grown in a field, and on average, your average pint of beer is 4 square feet of barley. That's what it takes.
Wow,
So
that's a lot.
yeah, yeah, and you know, hops.
Yeah, that's another thing that we talked about on the radio.
Hmm.
I didn't realize there was hop farms around here.
Yeah, at one time, New England, Vermont, New York were the premier hop producers in the world.
Really?
Going back to the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, and it moved out west. So now the Yakima Valley, which is in western Washington, is the main area, and they grow a lot of other things there. They grow a lot of fruits and stuff, and it's really you know, kind of a mountainous desert, and they get mountain runoff water, and so they can irrigate, and it helps with the diseases and pests and stuff like that. So they really have a lot of control, and they're really good at growing up there. And most of the hops in the U.S. or even the world come from that area.
Oh.
Now, you know, England and Germany have a rich tradition
And
of
they
it.
say, Germany, I always think of when hops, I think Germany, because I know there's tons of
Mhm.
hop farms out there.
Yep. And, you know, in those traditional beers, you still want to get some hops either that came from there originally, varieties that impart certain signature aromas and flavors, or that, you know, are grown around here.
Adds a
that
little bite
have-
to the beer, right?
Yeah, that adds bitterness and flavor, and it balances the sweetness of the malt. But I did work my way up through breweries, and learned a lot about the business of beer before wanting to venture out on my own. And even then, it wasn't on my own. You know, my first foray into brewery ownership was with Wormtown, and my co-founder, Tom Oliveri, owns Peppercorns in Worcester, and that's where we initially started. And he's got a great business mind, and he was able to see, I think, that brewing is very similar to being a restaurateur or a cook.
Right.
You take ingredients, you add value, you serve it to the customer. And he knew what that was like, and he was interested in beer, and you know, we made a great team and partnership, and it became much more than, you know, either of us had thought.
You need a lot of equipment though, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, it depends how much beer you want to make. I tell
Yeah.
people it's the same amount of labor. It takes the same amount of time to make 5 gallons as it does 5,000. You just need a
You
5,000
just need a
gallon
bigger
pot.
capacity.
That's it, right? And you know, and most of the stuff in brewing is stainless steel, 300 grade stainless steel,
Yeah.
because it can be cleaned and sanitized to a level you need, and it doesn't deteriorate over time. But those are not inexpensive items.
No, it wouldn't be.
Yeah,
But in the long run, they work out better.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be open for any period of time, that you want to get the right equipment, you want to do things the right way, and the ROI is out there. You know, it could be 5, 7, 10 years. Depends on how much you're going to brew. But
Right.
you know, having the right equipment helps when you get to the tasting of the beer.
Wormtown, you have the Let's Be Hoppy.
So I created Be Hoppy back
Hoppy.
in
I love
2010.
that stuff.
It's obviously the most popular beer they make, and I'm very proud of that beer. And it's still great to see people drinking it today.
What I like about it, you know you had a beer.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's got a lot
You
of
know,
flavor.
you drink one of these light beers from national companies, you know you had something cold, but you could have had a cold glass of water, which is, well,
It's definitely a completely different. Usually the craft beers are more flavor forward, but I will
Oh,
say
yeah.
the trend is going also back to the lighter beers, and it's very hard to make a very light beer that doesn't have any flavor defects or off aromas. So you got to give a lot of credit to those breweries. It's hard to make something that consistent all the time.
that's got to be difficult to do.
Mm-hmm. It is, and lagers take longer to brew than ales.
Right.
So when you get these, what some people call mass-produced lagers, you're buying those for really a lot less money than craft beers, but it takes them much longer to brew it in much bigger tanks. But they've got the benefit of a couple hundred years of production underneath their belt.
Right.
So and the economies of scale, are really there. When you can buy, farm loads of grain. With a small brewer like myself right now, we're buying, bags of grain, 55-pound bags of grain.
Right.
So when I make a batch of beer, I may be using 500 pounds of grain. But big breweries buy it by the silo or the boat full.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
tons,
The entire trailer truck comes in and the whole thing.
millions of pounds. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's about 2 pounds of malted grain per gallon of beer.
The United States tend to be a lager type of country, right?
Well,
And
right now,
Pilsners are still popular, but
yeah, I think if you look at the overall volume,
I think the German influence with the lager
hmm
caught on
yeah,
back in the middle 1800s.
yeah, I think the immigrants that came to this country were looking for beers that were similar to what they had,
Right.
back home, and those are the styles that became popular, and even to this day are still, the number one brands or
Right.
styles of beer that have been out there, and
Yeah,
The
prior to that was ale.
yeah, and
That's a British thing.
ales are a little bit easier. They ferment at a warmer temperature. So, before, mechanized refrigeration, it was easier to make ales than it was
Right.
to make lagers.
And it kept better.
You still need to, figure out how to store it. And, before you had stainless steel kegs, which is what everybody uses now, you'd have a cooper making, wooden barrels.
Right.
Before that, they were, probably using, earthenware or stone crocks, and you gotta think back to, the Industrial Revolution and even glass bottles. And, before there was glass bottles, it was mostly these draft beers in these
Yeah.
wooden kegs. And if you wanted to take some home, you just got a bucket.
Yeah, you brought your bucket. That's where the song, "There's a hole in my bucket."
Okay.
Or, no, the text, oh God.
Is it the
Hank
one?
Williams song.
Oh, okay.
My
Not
bucket's
the.
got a hole in it.
I was thinking of the nursery rhyme with the Dear Liza.
Yeah, Liza, yeah. But that might, well, I think he's talking about getting the water.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But Hank Williams wrote a song about, my bucket's got a hole in it.
Yeah.
And that's because you did back then, you went to the local bar,
Yep.
this is prior to Prohibition,
Mm-hmm.
and you filled up your bucket and took it home.
Yeah.
In fact, you might send the kid down, because there was no drinking age.
That's right. Oh, yeah. I mean, you'd send the kid down to get the beer, to get
Yeah.
the cigarettes. I mean,
Yeah, you could buy anything.
if you were in a small town and everybody knew each other,
Right.
they'd send you with a note or whatever.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah, and you put it on a tab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, credit, store
Yeah.
credit. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
what
yeah.
people don't realize, I don't know if you've ever heard this, the Pilgrims stopped in, off the Cape when they first came. They came into Cape Cod Bay and they went ashore on the Cape. Well, everybody thinks they were looking for food. No, they were looking for fresh water because they wanted to make more beer. They had run out of beer.
Oh, yeah.
And, back then, everybody drank beer. beer or wine because you couldn't drink the water; it was all polluted.
Mm. There's a brewery down there now called Mayflower Brewing, obviously in recognition of one of the ships, and the owner of it is a descendant from.
Oh, from the Pilgrims.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, exactly. So I think Drew down there at Mayflower would know a lot more about that, but it's pretty cool.
No, that's what they actually. I read this,
Yeah,
and I'm a big history guy. I read history books constantly, and they were looking for fresh water to brew more beer.
I believe it. And many times in civilization's history, you got to boil beer to make it. And
Yes.
once you boil it, it kills off any of the bacteria
Right.
in there. And hops do have a antibacterial quality to them, as well as being bitter and providing a balance to the malt sweetness. But it wasn't the only spice. I mean, they at different times in history, you'd be having different things. And there's certain areas where hops don't grow that well.
Yes.
We're here in New England at the right latitude, and then there's a similar band in the southern hemisphere that runs through New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. Those are other good hop growing regions that create some very unique products that I've been lucky enough to
You
brew
have a
with.
certain moderate type of climate.
Yeah, it's certain latitudes have it, and
Yep.
there's something about the way the hop vine grows and how much sun it needs that certain areas.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But
Yeah.
a lot of people, if you look up hops and you're into agricultural or you're into having a garden, you'd be surprised how many wild hops are growing out there, or maybe these are remnants of previously planted hops. But
Yeah.
when I was living in Worcester, I got on my car one day, and there was just hops growing on the hill, and we were pretty close to downtown, and there were just wild hops growing right there.
I'll bet a lot of people don't even know what they look like.
That's probably true.
Yeah, they see it, they don't know that's a hop.
Right. Yeah. They grow like a vine, but they call it a vine, and
Yeah.
it really likes being trellised, but it doesn't have to be. And once they're established, they're really hard to get rid of. So if you're interested in growing hops, you probably only start with one or two rhizomes, and they make great decorations though too. They grow up every year, so in the fall you can cut them and decorate with them, and
Oh.
in the
Now,
spring.
what do they look like? They're berries?
No. So it's like almost like a grapevine, but it grows every year.
Yeah.
So it comes out.
But the hop itself, what
The hop itself. So it's a bud. It's a green bud that got kind of layers of
almost like a pine cone.
yeah, like a miniature little pine cone. Exactly.
Okay, I want to look for it. I'm going to look it up on the net.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you should. Yeah, they very interesting, very unique. Not a ton of uses other than for brewing
Right.
beer. You might find them in some soap or something, but not something you're going to eat. Or
I got a bunch of elderberries popped up in my
Excuse me.
They just.
Oh, yeah?
I never planted them. They just happened to get there. Probably birds ate them and
Oh yeah.
dropped the seeds,
Yeah.
and they just spreading like crazy. I get them every year.
I love stuff like that. We had some raspberries that I'm sure somebody planted at
Oh
our
yeah, I
house,
got raspberries.
and they're great to have.
Yeah. Well, the birds eat these berries, and then they droppings are everywhere,
Yeah.
and they drop the seeds out, and all of a sudden they just start growing.
It's great how Mother Nature, has,
Yes.
over the millennia has figured this stuff out, and
Yeah, like you said, hops started out as a wild plant.
yep.
We cultivated it, but it started out on its own.
Yeah, the commercial varieties we have now came about from breeding, and
Right.
they get a certain vine, they really liked it. They said, okay, well, let's cut off some of its rootstock and keep it going, and eventually it was named. But there's some really old hop varieties that if you want to make a beer that tasted like something that you might find in a cookbook from the 16 or 1700s, you're going to want to get those hop varieties.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say they're in vogue now, but they certainly have a place in brewing.
That another thing with brewing, you can go back in time and brew something that was used by people 500-600 years ago, right?
Yeah. The Brewers Association has done a couple of historical beer releases. There's a beer historian, if you look him up on Facebook. I think his name's Ron Pattison, who has a project, and he goes into the historical brewing records of breweries in, especially England, that have been around,
Right.
longer than this country, and he, finds the records of what they were buying and what they were brewing, and he breaks it down, and you can brew
Well,
a batch at home.
Beer actually goes back to the ancient Egyptians.
Dogfish Head has done some recreations of some of the.
And the
I think
Babylonians as well.
I think that, yeah, whenever they uncover these clay pots or that they used to brew in, they'll take some of the whatever's still left, dust, I'm sure at this point,
Yeah.
and they analyze it, and they come up with a list of ingredients, and some brewers have tried to recreate what you would have had back then, but they also were because they didn't have refrigeration, they were drinking stuff that was still fermenting and putting straws in it so you could get underneath the foam. And I don't think the experience would be pleasant for people nowadays, but I think back then it was probably
Well,
pretty good.
you knew no other way,
Mhm.
and you didn't know anything else,
Yeah,
so you accepted it.
absolutely.
I can tell you, I spent 18 months in Germany, and they don't like cold beer. They drink their beer warm.
It's an acquired taste, and I think if you
Well,
if you're used to drinking beer at a certain temperature, you're always going to like it like
Yeah,
that, right?
I like it warm now because I had it over there in the guest house. We had the enlisted men's club. The bartender there would take a bottle of Bud out and he'd run it under hot water
Oh wow,
before he drank it.
interesting.
He was German.
Yeah, yeah. I think obviously American traditions or what's going on here spreads, and highly carbonated beer is also something that wasn't really available
Right.
until recently. You get stainless kegs; they can hold the pressure. Really the only thing that was fairly well carbonated before that was champagne, but it was re-fermented in the bottle.
Right.
And that's how you would get
But it comes out of the ground carbonated.
the fermentation.
Yeah.
Has the CO2 in it, and
Right.
English casks, they'd let them breathe and they'd let it flow out. So the casks
Right.
in wood is porous, and if they didn't, put some pitch or lining on a barrel, it would just lose the carbonation.
All the carbon bubbles would disappear, goes through the crack.
Having really cold beer, very highly carbonated, is kind of a unique thing, and it isn't necessarily the best way to enjoy something.
Well, it had to be a big problem prior to refrigeration coming around.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine they'd have ice houses to try to keep it cold, but it had to be very expensive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think.
So in a lot of cases, you had the local saloon, you served it warm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you were in an area that had access to ice, transporting ice is expensive. Before they had the railroads,
Right.
Everything else was moving on. Horse and buggies or whatever, and it was really more local.
The
And,
History Channel just did a series about beer.
oh yeah.
It was really good. They focused on Pabst
Okay. Nice.
and how, they almost went out of business too because of Prohibition, but they managed to get through it.
Mm. Yeah, the regional brewers and how they became big, and what ended up becoming consolidation into the 70s, and
Yeah,
I think at the low point 28 breweries or 33 breweries in the whole U.S. And at this point there's I believe there's over 200 breweries in Massachusetts right now, between
Right.
200 and 250. So
the big brewers, we're down to just a handful now, aren't we?
oh, maybe with consolidation. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Brewers Association does a good job keeping statistics, and I mean you can really create categories if you want it. They do it based upon who owns the brewery, what
Right.
their barrelage is. So.
Well, I know Anheuser-Busch started buying small breweries
Mm-hmm.
because they saw that trend.
Yep, they've since sold some of those brands and breweries, either back to the founders or to other breweries as well.
Yeah.
So I think everything's cyclical. I mean, hope we don't go down to a small number of breweries. I think having a local brewery is here to stay. People like it. It's
Well, you had a lot of local brewers that are bottling or canning it too.
Cans are very popular.
Yeah, so you can go into a package store and pick from a local brewery right there.
Hmm. Absolutely, and the technology has really gotten to the point where, a brewery can either have a mobile canner come in, or they can have a small enough self canning unit that they can do
Right.
it themselves. But
I know
that,
Purgatory was doing it. And
Mhm.
you're gonna continue that?
So we have crowlers, 32-ounce cans
Right.
that we fill off the taps, and if we get a beer that's popular enough that we want to can it in the future, I'm actually going to reach out to some friends in the industry that already have canning lines and
Oh,
probably a little bit of extra capacity and see if they would make and can it for us.
oh,
So
okay.
the space down there is small, and we've got enough space to make beer and draft beer,
Yeah,
but canning is its own thing, and if you're going to invest in a canning line, or even have a mobile canning line, and quality's got to be top of mind,
right. Yeah, you can can it, but nobody buys it. What, you wasted your money.
and down there you'd have to put the bottling or canning mobile line in the tap room, and I think without disrupting the seating there and having to deal with the cleanup and everything,
Yeah.
and with an eye towards the highest quality, we'd probably just let somebody else that already has the setup do it for us.
The crowd was a common thing back prior to Prohibition.
Hmm.
There were a lot of places that's where how you bought your beer. If you didn't use a bucket.
It's been very popular for us. I think we've gone through
Because you can cap it,
a couple
put it in the
hundred of them.
refrigerator.
Yep,
Okay, have a glass right now, cap it, put it in the refrigerator, have a glass tomorrow.
yep, yeah. It's a great way to do it. Um, the crowler, the can growler, I guess is kind of a contraction of those two words, is recyclable just like a regular one, and then it's a great way to get the beer home, keep a good quality on it, but also not have to invest in such a big product. Is the line?
And you know it's fresh.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's the other
absolutely.
thing, you buy some of the national product, it may be the brewery may be in Merrimack, but how long ago was it brewed?
That's true. I mean, I think one of the things big breweries do well is dating. They do well on dating, so that there's transparency for the consumer, and also pasteurization, which is not something small breweries do. It really freezes the beer in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't need to pasteurize it.
You don't need to. It depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're leaving fermentable sugar in there, or if you're adding fruit, now we were talking about
Yeah,
fruit beers earlier. If you add, fruit to something and there's the possibility of it re-fermenting, you really need to pasteurize it in order to make sure it doesn't. That's the responsible thing to do. Or you add the fruit during fermentation so the yeast ferments it. As long as the yeast is happy and it's done fermenting, you can have an unfiltered beer or even a filtered beer that's unpasteurized. But if it's going to have major temperature fluctuations and you don't know what's going to happen to it out in the world, pasteurization is a pretty good option.
well, that's what you have to do with national guys, because they're shipping it so far.
They do, and there's definitely some smaller breweries that are starting to do it when the styles dictate, if they do have some
Well, like you said, you add
re-fermentation.
fruit to it, but myself, I would prefer it not pasteurized.
I think a lot of people feel that way. You're looking for something that's unfiltered, unpasteurized,
Right.
small batch, local, and you want it as fresh
Because
as
it does
possible.
change the flavor.
It does, yep. Yeah, I mean, pasteurization is, heating it up to a high temperature quickly and then cooling it down, which reduces the possibility of spoilage, but it also introduces that heat factor
Right,
to
you
it.
kill off any bacteria that's in there.
Yep. Excuse me.
But yeah, I mean it's quite a thing to brewing too. It's not something you can take up overnight.
No, no. I mean, it's something that I've spent 20+ years doing, and I still love doing it. And also, there's trends, and there's new ingredients, and there's different processes. So there's always something to learn or to be exposed to that can help you, create something. And I think that's what
Do you need if you're gonna do home brewing, you need some special equipment, right?
Yeah, I mean, not a ton. I'd say, most people could probably scrounge up you need something that you can boil in, and most people have, either a soup pot or a lobster
Right.
pot they could use. You got to cool it down from when it's boiling to room temperature, quick enough that it doesn't get any bacteria or wild yeast in the air into it. So probably that cooling part is
That could be tricky.
you can just spin a flexible copper coil into the pot and run some water through it, cold tap water, and that usually does it. And it's stuff you can just buy at the hardware store, really, or you can go to a homebrew shop, or now you can go online and do it. And then something to ferment in, and it can be as simple as an old water jug from the water fountain, a little 5 gallon
Right.
excuse me, jug.
Are you thinking about selling home brewing kits?
No, no, I think that's its own thing.
Yeah.
We buy bulk, and again, to us it's bulk, 55-pound bags.
Right.
If you're gonna homebrew, you want 1-pound bags.
Right.
And setting up that retail environment where people can pick stuff is really a unique thing, and there's just not enough square footage there. And again, I think people are now more accustomed to buying stuff online than ever when it comes to that. And there's a proliferation of
Yeah, that's changed the way people buy tremendously.
the online retailers, the ones we all know, but also ones that are very specific to brewing. And honestly, the grain suppliers have gotten savvy enough that they're supplying
They're
directly
putting
to
on
consumers.
websites.
Yeah, they've got their own websites where you can order the yeast, the hops, the grain, the cleaning supplies, and it all shows up in a box, and it all came from this company that put it together for you in the size you wanted. And I think there's definitely some breweries that try to help out the home brewers, and we'd love to help people out if they need something that we have. But I don't think putting a sign outside and saying you're open for home brewing supplies, as well as being a brewery, really does anyone much of a service, and probably just make a lot more work for me. And
Right.
I don't have time for it right now.
Right. What you're doing now is you want people to come in, sit down, have a couple of drinks, a
Yes.
couple of glasses of beer,
Yep. Yeah, our main focus
maybe
right
take
now.
home a jug.
Yeah, our main focus is being a tap room. And
Yep.
for us, what that means is a place where people can meet up or just, come on their own, have a great pint of beer, a little bit of food,
Yes.
and take something home and come back, as soon as they can for
I
us.
can tell you, myself, there's nothing like draft.
Hmm. Yeah. Draft beer is great. I mean, that's what we serve. And,
Yeah.
what the great part about it is you're pushing CO2 into the keg to displace the beer that comes out the faucet, and you're keeping it at refrigeration temperature the whole time. So, the opportunity for the beer to, have a situation where it's going to degrade in quality isn't existing right there. And that's why draft beer is so unique and so well. And even, out when you go to a pub, people keep draft beer cold. They don't always
Yes.
keep bottles or cans cold. They may have a certain amount that's cold, but then their back stock is warm sometimes. It's
Right.
the two or three things that are going to degrade beer super quickly is first oxygen, and then getting beer into a package, a bottle or a can. Even the best breweries in the world are doing single-digit parts per billion, which is a great number, but it's not zero.
Right.
And then from there, it's time and temperature. So, you have a super low oxygen beer that's a year old. Even if it's been kept cold, it's not going to be that good. It's a year.
Right.
It's a year old. You could, have a 1 week old beer, but it's been at 100 degrees in the back of your car in July.
Oh, God, it tastes horrible.
So, they're almost like multipliers or accelerators
Right.
on that. So it's tough to tell. You want as much information as possible. If you're looking for packaged beer, it's find it as fresh as possible and buy from somebody you trust that, keeps it cold or at least out of, sunlight too. I mean, cans, you don't have the sunlight issue, but, hops get skunked when they get in
Well, that's
direct
why beer
sunlight.
comes in round bottles.
It helps the UV filter out the UV.
Right.
Yep. You can get pre-isomerized hops that don't skunk. And some beers have a signature aroma or flavor that people are used to, and they're baking it into the formula there. But for the most part, you want to keep it out of the sunlight, and cans do that. And that's the most popular package now. It wasn't for the longest time, but it is now.
I think it goes back and forth. I mean, in the 60s, cans were popular,
Yeah.
and bottles came popular.
Yeah.
There is a difference in the taste.
Mm-hmm.
I think aluminum cans add a taste to the beer.
So they're lined. They've got a liner in them, but if you're drinking out of the can, your mouth is going to touch the outside of the
Right.
can. If you crack a can, pour it into a glass,
Yes.
or a bottle and pour it into the glass, they should be indistinguishable as the same brand, ideally. There is a difference in the closure, the can end seam versus a bottle crown.
Right.
So, and also when you go to package a beer, so try not to get too technical, but you can pull a vacuum on a bottle. So when you're prepping a bottle to fill it with beer, you gas it out with CO2, you pull a vacuum. You gas it out with CO2, you pull a vacuum. Double pre-evacuation, they call it. You hit it with pressure, and then you counter-fill it.
Oh,
Cans, you can't pull a vacuum on, or
Right.
you're going to crush them. So you just got to keep on pouring CO2 in there until you get it really low. You get a seal on there, you pressurize, you do a pressurized fill, and that's one of the benefits of a bigger canning line is you can do a pressurized fill. Most of the smaller ones, they just slow the beer down, but it's an open air fill. And then you got to keep CO2 blanket on it as it goes to get seams.
uh-huh.
Same thing with the crown on the bottle. Over time, you get more oxygen ingress on a crown than a can seal. So the cans start out usually at a higher oxygen level,
Right.
but after 3 or 4 weeks, usually it equals out, and then the bottles end up with more oxygen. So
Oh,
a lot of beer scientists out there. I don't.
I can tell you one thing about cans. I'm old enough to remember when the flip top first came out,
Oh yeah,
and you pulled it, and the thing came up, and people would take them and throw them in the can,
oh yeah, yeah.
and they ended up swallowing them. That's when they came
Swallowing
up
them isn't good, but they're
No.
better than ending up on the side of the road when they're
right, but that's when they came up with the attached.
the attached one. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the reason.
It makes sense. And then
But prior to that, you had to have the can opener, church key, as they call them,
Yep.
because all the cans were sealed, and you
Mm-hmm.
open it both two openings, so you get to let the air in, so
Oh
the
yeah.
beer would come out.
Yep. The amount of aluminum in the can end is greater than the amount in the whole can itself. So having that tab there that's still attached when you recycle is a great thing. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's just going to go back into being a can for the next time.
Yeah, that's the thing. All beer cans are recyclable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. And the majority of them do get recycled.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's a great resource, and now they've got PVA free linings, so people were worried about that for a while, and it's just all technology that they've come up with over time, and they've made. I'm sure you've noticed, and people that are old enough to remember that the top of the can gets smaller and smaller
Yes.
and smaller because the can end has more aluminum in it. They want to use less aluminum to get the can to you. So they
Ah.
keep on shrinking the size of the head so that there's less aluminum in the final product.
you might think, well, how much are they saving? When you're talking millions of cans, you're talking a lot of money.
The number of cans is staggering. I've been to these can plants, and they are marvels of engineering.
Yes.
First, they got to extrude the cans from sheet aluminum, and then they got to print them. And
Yes.
like you said, millions and millions of them, and it's just going all the time. And the first time that I had a beer that we were going to can and we wanted to get the can printed, we went and saw it being proofed, and they run a couple cans for you, but they're going so fast they've got a little arm that rejects it, almost like a flipper in a pinball machine. And you look at them, and you can ask them to tweak it a little bit here and there, but once they lock it in.
Well, yeah, and the idea is to go as fast as possible because that keeps your costs down.
And they're running 24/7.
Yeah.
They're there's only so many can plants out there, and there's only so
Right.
many can companies out there. So if you want to get a printed can, you usually have to agree to get a whole tractor trailer load full of cans, and that's still a small order. They usually want you to guarantee that you're going to get.
Well, they gotta set the machinery,
Mm-hmm.
that's costly,
Yep.
so you wanna get as much out of it as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's good is, now there's post production places that are painting cans.
Oh,
So the plastic labels on cans are not a good thing, because when they melt down the aluminum to turn it back into a can, all that plastic is an issue.
well, yeah, it's gonna mix in with the liquid
It'll
aluminum.
mix in, or it'll burn off, and it'll
Yeah.
create issues. So, ideally, you're getting printed cans either directly from the manufacturer of the cans, or from other companies now that are digitally printing them. Or, if you get a can with a label on it, peel the label off before you put it in the recycling container.
Oh,
That's how you can guarantee that it's good. So you got to peel it off.
oh, okay, I haven't seen those cans. Well, I don't drink too much beer now because I'm diabetic.
Oh
I
yeah.
I used to drink a lot more beer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like I said, when I do have one, I like to have a good one. If I go to a restaurant, I ask if they have draft,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because it's so much better.
And the keg is infinitely cleanable, just like
Yes.
the beer tank. So really environmentally, draft beer is, better as well. And there's obviously certain instances you can't get draft beer, and not a lot of people want to make the investment to have a kegerator at home.
Right. Yeah, we're getting that. If you draft beer at home, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So
But
for the
a
instance
lot
of,
of restaurants don't carry draft beer because it's more expensive to put the equipment in.
you got to put the equipment in, and you got to service it too. If you want to have
Yeah.
good draft beer, you got to clean the draft lines, you got to clean the keg couplers, you got to clean the keg faucets, and it's time and effort which you don't have to put in if you're just going to open a bottle or a can.
But now you have a tap room. How many taps do you have in there?
So we have 12 taps.
So that's a good job. That's a good amount of variety.
Yep, we just installed a new draft system a couple weeks ago. So we got 12 taps. We can do up to 12 beers. Right now, one of the taps is just a CO2 line that we use to purge the crowler before we fill it.
Yeah.
And I was going to mention, the crowlers we fill, we do put a label on them so you know what's on it, but we use a paper label.
Ah,
So in high-speed canning runs, you really can't use a paper label. That's why
Right.
they use the plastic, pressure-sensitive plastic, and that's what you got to remove. On ours, if you recycle it, because it's paper, you don't have to take it off. It'll burn off, no problem, in the smelting process. So, but yeah, we've got the 12 lines, and we can do up to 12, and they're coming right out of the cooler wall, so the kegs are 5 feet away.
yeah.
All brand new keg couplers, keg lines. It's really a nice system, and the idea is just to, like you said, have quality beer at your disposal.
So you're constantly brewing a different type of beer all the time, right?
Oh yeah,
You would have 12 different brand styles on hand.
yeah. I mean, so we understand that New England IPAs are the number one style right now. So our goal is to always have a New England IPA on tap.
Oh,
And-
I'd like an IPA.
Yeah, and then the amount of styles out there, is huge, and then within the variations are huge as well.
Right.
You could take all sorts of beers and add fruit or different grains. For instance, the other day I brewed a rye porter. So rye porter isn't a style
like
of
a
beer,
porter
but
too, yeah.
porter is a style, and so I use 20% rye in the grist for it. So it'll have a little bit of that spicy rye flavor in there.
I'll always go with an IPA wherever I see it on the menu
Mm-hmm.
because I know it's good.
Yeah.
Was it India
So IPA stands for India Pale Ale.
Pale Ale? Yeah, and that came from the British.
Apparently, yeah.
It was brewed for the ships
Right.
that were traveling to India.
Apparently, during their imperialistic period, they had to keep the troops satiated with beer that they were
Right.
used to from back home, and
Yeah.
adding more hops was the way to do it. It kind of kept, and by the time
Yeah.
it got there, I'm sure it didn't taste like it did back in England.
Right. But it worked out and became popular.
Yeah, and New England IPAs are a new thing. You know,
Yeah.
the name New England. We're in New England. It's a very high hopping rate.
Who
At
first
the
came up with
end.
the New England IPA? Was it Massachusetts or
No, no. You know,
Berkshire?
there's a couple of breweries that started making beers in that style. The Alchemist up in Stowe and Waterbury is one of them, and Treehouse out in it was Monson, and now Charlton is probably
Oh,
most well known for it. The Hill Farmstead Brewery does a lot of, and there's characteristics of these beers that, they're tons of aroma and flavor from the hops, but not very high bitterness. Very soft
right.
mouthfeel quality. It's a unique thing that has really taken the beer world by storm over the last 10, 11, 12 years. And it's what customers want when they come in. Sometimes they call it the hazy IPA or New England IPA. And so we're going to make sure we've got what customers want. I mean, being a tap room, our goal is to cater to the clientele, and we want to make sure that they're comfortable. There's beers there they like, and there's a
Right.
beer there for everybody in your party. So, right now we've got a Pilsner on, a Kolsch, Stout, Amber Ale, the New England IPA, West Coast IPA, hard seltzer, which is gluten free, and we've got some homemade syrups we can put in from different fruits.
Yeah, the stout is like a Guinness, right?
So yeah, the
And that's a good beer. I like that too.
the roasted malts, which I tell people are most similar to how you think about coffee. There's the dark roast, the medium roast, the
Yes.
light roast, but that's what they do to the malted barley in order to get the color and the flavor in it is roasting it, and Guinness being the most famous stout
Right.
is the one that people have the most familiarity with.
But now, isn't there breweries right here in New England? You could have a brewery tour.
There's enough breweries in Worcester County. You could do a brewery
Right, I
tour.
know, that'd
You
be
wouldn't
some-
make it very far if you had a pint at each one. In fact, I think this summer.
Well, it's like you have the wine tours,
Yeah, yeah.
especially in upper state New York, where there's a lot of
Oh
wineries.
yeah, yeah,
You could have a tour like that.
yeah.
There's a sample in each one.
I think it's a great business idea. I don't know what you're doing on the weekends, but if you get a passenger van together,
Yeah.
I know they do it in Maine. People sign up and you could drive them around, and then you don't have
Yeah.
to worry about having too many beers and driving.
Oh, and before we're going to run low on time, are you going to be serving food?
So we have food right now. We're serving cheese pizza, pepperoni pizza that we procure from Rail Trail in Milford. We've got German-style pretzels that we get from Birch Tree Bread in Worcester. We've got charcuterie from Robin's Table. So Amanda operates out of our kitchen, and you can pre-order a charcuterie board to have at the brewery or to take home for an event. And also she has pre-made ones there that are available. Usually share them between 2 or 3 people.
Okay.
Nice.
She prepares them elsewhere and brings them in.
No, she prepares them in our kitchen.
Oh, you have a kitchen then?
Yeah, we do. We have a kitchen there. Yeah.
Oh,
Yep. So.
that's something new now. That wasn't there before, right?
It was there. Yep. Yep.
Oh, I didn't read.
Maybe
oh.
not at the beginning, but yeah, they had a panini and soup menu where we're focusing on the pizzas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got food, we've got the beers,
Nothing like pizza and beer.
the pretzel, the pizza. I mean, the beer. Again, it's we want to satisfy what the customers want, and
Right. But no, pizza goes great with beer. It really does.
I'd say it's probably the number one.
Yeah.
And it's not a very complex big kitchen, so we're trying to keep it pretty simple, and
Yeah.
places that have a little bit more equipment and other things can do some other items, but we're somewhat limited.
Yeah. You ever think about you looking to expand one day maybe?
Well, we'll see. I
I
think.
know you're going to use the outside.
Yep. So we've already got some outdoor seating. We're looking to upgrade it a little bit, and we're
Right.
we're looking to see what our options are there. So we're going to make sure we continue to have the outdoor seating with a view of the falls right there on the Mumford
Yes.
River, and the river going by. It was just a gorgeous location.
Oh, it is,
in the Linwood.
beautiful
Yeah,
location.
yeah.
COVID really brought outdoor seating to light.
Mm-hmm.
And every restaurant, well, they were doing it out of necessity,
Yeah.
but they're continuing because people really liked it.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think anytime you can do anything outside, it's a benefit. So
Right.
eating outside, drinking outside, going for a walk outside. I mean, it makes it better, right? Nobody wants to walk around the inside of a building all the time. It's better
Right.
outside.
No, you feel good outside, and especially when you get into warmer weather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've already had people sitting outside. And some days I kind of shake my head, but. We allow dogs on the outside seating, but not inside. So some people bring their dogs and they're willing to sit outside
Yeah.
just because of that. So it's nice to see.
Well, people bring their dogs everywhere now.
It's true. That's true.
I see them in Walmart.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's another thing that more recently, or maybe with COVID, it's happened. Is people are bringing their dogs everywhere.
Yeah.
So, but because we have the kitchen, we don't allow them
Right.
inside unless it's a service animal, and but plenty of room outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you're in a good spot, and this is where it is, right here at the Linwood Mill, right down on Linwood Avenue.
Yeah, we would be over in
Over
that
on
corner
the-
behind
yeah.
you. Yeah,
Yes.
is where we are. Where we're sitting, the river would be right behind us there.
When you pull into the parking lot, they can't miss you. You're right there on the left.
Yeah, yep. Come down.
Nice awning.
Yep, we got a sign on the side of the building. So we're in a standalone building that I believe had been used for shipping and receiving, and more recently it had been used for a couple other purposes, and it's great.
Well, the speaker company was upstairs, but I think they moved out.
Yes, Fulcrum was upstairs, although there is a Fulcrum sound system in there that we're using. The sound's very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they do a great job.
Yeah.
But they wanted to move that was their research. They
Mhm.
wanted to get it into their mill with them
Oh.
together. So they were planning on moving for a while.
Okay, yeah, that was before my time.
Yeah.
But I have seen those guys, and it's great to see all the support from not only our landlords, Bill and Patty, but the whole
Yeah.
community. I mean, really has been great. The crew from Access TCA's come over, and Triple E Electric. I mean, you name it. I've met people from all over the area, and they're just really welcoming and very supportive as well.
Now, you open in the afternoons?
So our current hours are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 12 to 9, Sunday, 12 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime in the warmer weather, we're probably going to add some hours on Wednesday. So we'll do seasonal hours. We'll update them on our website, murderhill.com. And you can see us on the socials as well. We'll make sure we keep everything updated on there, the beer lists, the food, stuff like that. So right now we're on Instagram and Facebook if you want to find us out there on social media.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in, Ben.
Always
And,
great to talk to you.
Glad to see you there. We need a brewery in town. We got to keep it going.
Well, we're happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll see you next week on Senior Info, because it's the first Thursday of the month, and we're going to do Senior Info along with Kelly.